Welcome to the Chase MedSearch Podcast, the place where we dive deep into the medical device sales industry by discussing the current trends, timeless philosophies, and amazing experiences that shape our niche of the industry. Join me, Jordan Chase, on a guided tour as I speak with established sales leaders and professionals as they share stories that will help you get in, stay in, and thrive in your medical device sales career. Let's start the show. Welcome back to the Chase MedSearch Podcast. Reminder for those who don't know, we're not just a podcast. We are a medical device recruiting firm, and we fill positions nationally. There's not one state I know of where we have not made placements. Visit chasemedsearch.com to find our latest position listings. You can also find me, Jordan Chase, on LinkedIn, and I post up-to-date position listings there. I'm capped at 30,000 LinkedIn connections, so you can follow me on LinkedIn, but unfortunately, I can't accept your invitation if you send me one. Finally, if you've got feedback on our podcast, please email it to me at jordan@chasemedsearch.com. And if you like what you hear, please leave us a glowing 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. It does help grow the show. Got an excellent guest today in Jim Surik. We've actually never met, but we have a lot of friends in common and have worked with different companies or for the same company at different times. And so I don't think we've actually ever overlapped. But Jim is a commercialization strategist with 6 M&A exits under his belt. He works with startups and turnaround situations. He's currently serving as VP of sales for a company helping physicians detect shunt malfunction in hydrocephalus patients through an innovative device. Maybe we'll talk a little bit about that. He is very active on LinkedIn. He's a great follow on there, so you should do that. His podcast is called Medical Sales Nation. Guarantee you won't need your coffee listening to it. It's got music. Jim brings the energy, and I'm very happy to have him on today because he's a thought leader in medical commercialization and sales, and he's also very accessible and willing to share his knowledge. Jim, welcome.
Hey, Jordan. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Excited to be here.
Yeah, I've heard great things about you from tons of people, one being our mutual friend, Tom Petzelt. I gave you an introduction, but for the audience that might not have heard from you, you hail from Chicago, right?
That's right. Family, mom and dad from the Midway Airport area, and grandparents, cousins, nieces, nephews everywhere around Chicago. And sophomore Danik. So I started there when it was Danik. I was a 1099 rep working for Pat Pilcher out of Chicago. And then, I don't know, it was within a year, they made the acquisition to Sophomore, changed the name to Sophomore Danik, and then the rest is history.
Yeah, that's fantastic. We've got a lot of people and a wide audience of listeners, and a significant chunk of them are people that want to badly break in. I always try to ask my guests when they're on, how did you get in this crazy world of medical device sales?
I came out of graduate school out of what's called Thunderbird, so the American Graduate School of International Management. And my roommate in college was working for a distributor, a Zimmer distributor in Chicago. And I was coming out of school. I got a job selling for General Medical. And how I got there was through my buddy, my roommate. At the time, it was a little easier to get into med devices. But I was selling to offices, selling toilet paper. I was selling, the table paper, syringes. I mean, it was not a glorious job. And I got the living crap kicked out of me every day. But eventually I got into devices because of my buddy, Tim Stacy, who's still selling joints for Smith & Nephew in Chicago. And he introduced me to the Zimmer guys. And I was going down this road of maybe selling some drills. And it just ended up that I met Pat Pilcher, who is the distributor, interviewed, and it was in spine. And at the time, for people out there, there was a time when pedicle screws was a 4-letter word. There was a ton of litigation from patients suing manufacturers, suing doctors. And I mean, it was just a terrible place to go because you had all this litigation going on. And when I was thinking about what to do, everybody was telling me to go to Zimmer. And I just looked at it and I said, everyone's telling me to go left. I think I'm going to go right. And I jumped into spine, and it was the best decision I ever made. And since then, I don't listen necessarily. It's a strength, and others would call it a weakness, but I don't necessarily go with the grain of thought on most things. I'm always challenging it, not to be disruptive, but to really be discerning and understanding. It's like Gretzky said, where's the puck going?
Yeah.
And talk to my father-in-law was a neurosurgeon at the time, and talked to him about it. Wasn't a big implanter, but he saw the direction of this thing and went that way and never looked back.
That's excellent. And if I were to isolate a couple things you said there, you did get into medical right out of school, which is hard to do these days. In some ways, it's always been hard to do, but it sounds like it happened for you right away. But that job was a kick your teeth in type of job where you got beat up. You're selling products, I assume, that were not high margin products, and you're just an absolute sponge and you're learning all the time. Did they provide any training to you?
That's the thing when we talk about training, right? So there's clinical training and there's sales training.
Right.
We got very little sales training, and the products, we were carrying 10,000 products. So it was a joke of a training. And I got out there and literally, like you said, I was getting killed. I have an article that I posted on, it's still up on my LinkedIn. It's called, I Was the Worst Sales Rep in the World. Right. And it's a picture of me literally laying on my living room floor, going, oh God, help me. Cause I can't do this. And I ended up, there's a guy, Paul Kramer, who just retired, who was killing it. And after about 6 or 8 months, I walked up to him and I just said, Paul, I'm dying out there and I don't know what to do. I don't know what I'm doing wrong. I don't know what I should be doing. And we got in this conversation, and he was a very quiet man and just very gentle. And he said, well, he just asked me a few questions. He goes, oh, you're under the misunderstanding that you're selling medical supplies. And I'm like, Paul, I have a book that's 4 inches thick with medical supplies. If I'm not selling what's in this book, what am I selling? And he goes, you're selling transportation and delivery services. And I was like, what? You sit there and he goes, well, what value do you bring outside the same syringe that they can get from 10 other places? I said, I don't know, and he goes, it's how we deliver it. It's how we package it. It's how we do this. It's how we do that. And then the value for them is this, this, and this. And then he kept saying, and the value for them is this. And then so I sat down with them, took all this in, re-strategized how I was attacking the market, and then things started to turn around. And I started to understand the differences because being young and you're coming into this, you get a quota, you get this, and it's all about you, right? It's about my quota. It's about what I have to do. But that is the worst way to approach sales. It's about your customer, right? And you hear this, what pain are you going to resolve? And that's true. It's what pain am I going to resolve for you? How am I going to help you overcome this? What opportunities can I present to you that are going to be clinically better, economically better, and maybe a strategic value on top of that? And that comes through engagement and understanding. And so I started to have those conversations, and the whole thing started to turn around for me. And that was about a year and a half there is then when I took the road over to Sophomore Organic. And I'll never forget, I had my first, because you try to get in, you never see anybody. And that's how it is today. But I walked into Dr. Bernstein's office at Lutheran General in Chicago, Park Ridge. And I walked up, I go, my name's Jim. I'm with Danik, and I'd like to speak to Dr. Bernstein. All right, let me get his nurse. Nurse comes out. Greta looks at me and goes, all right, sit down. He'll talk to you in like 10 minutes. I broke into a sweat because I didn't think anybody was going to talk to me. I'm in this suit and I am just profusely sweating sitting there, right? Going, I am not prepared for this. And all I did is I just relaxed and I just started asking him questions.
Yeah.
And, what are you looking for? What's happening? And it was really because I didn't know. I just wanted to go in there to be very curious. And he became one of my, greatest accounts and still a friend. And he operated on my wife in May. So it's how things go. So
that's a full circle moment right there.
Yeah.
And it's so interesting. And I think young people wanting to start out, and I talk to them all the time, like literally I get referrals every week. I don't even know how many people with their kids, their nephews, their friends' kids from college, or some young person they ran across who, wants to get into this world or is just graduating. And it sounds like what you did was the biggest thing was the shift in thinking to say, it's not about me and pushing my products and making my quota. At the end of the day, I know I got to do that, but it's really about solving this customer's problem. And I need to look at this as we're transportation delivery services, which is what they need. That's essential for them. They need that. Is that?
Yep, that's exactly right. And turning this on its head and just saying, if I can solve their problems, if I become an asset to them, they then will see that, appreciate that, and then buy my products.
Mhm.
And it came full circle in the trainings that we developed over time, where we would train the reps to ask questions, not questions that are like, "Can you tell me, what are the biggest challenges?" It's not that. It was very meaningful questions and not a lot, 2 or 3, 4 questions.
Mhm.
And then as like this conversation's heading, it builds on itself. And if you get to a point in those first conversations where somebody says, a doc or a nurse or an APP says, "What are you selling?" Because you haven't brought up your product yet, right?
Right.
Then you've got them listening to you.
Hmm.
They are paying attention now because most sales reps don't do this. Most sales reps don't understand how to do this, never been trained to do it, never have been given an opportunity or a chance to grow these skill sets. But once you start doing that and you understand that higher level of engagement and thought and concept through very simple but meaningful questions will lead to an engagement, and they never bring that product out. We've taught our reps going, "Doc, this is what we're selling. This is what we have, but I don't have it on me today. Let me schedule another call so I can go over this because as we said, you're hurting here, here, and here, and we can fix this with this, this, and this. But let me come back with that because I didn't want to bring something that would have no value to you."
Yeah.
Right? And they're like, "Who the hell are you?" You know,
Hmm.
because it's a complete flip of the script on 90% of most sales folks out there.
That's great. And it plays into human nature because they've actually made an investment in you as you've sat there and listened to them talk about their challenges, the things they're facing, what they wish was different, etc., without bringing up your product. Now they've invested in you. They've got a listening ear.
Yep.
And now you're special in a way you weren't before you had that conversation.
Yep.
That's excellent. Another significant segment of this audience is neuromodulation people. And you have led several organizations in your career and continue to do that.
Hmm.
Once upon a time, there was an organization called Advanced Bionics. And people may not know that history, but that eventually became Boston Scientific Neuromodulation.
Yes, it did.
And for a big chunk of our audience, that is something that is key. Take us through your experience of working at ABI in those early days in neuromod. That's sort of my home, Medtronic. That's where I started back in 1998.
Yep. Yeah, so it was interesting. So it was about 2003, and I got a call from Al Mann. And if you don't know who Al Mann is, you're listening to this podcast, go look it up. He created Pace Setters, which became St. Jude's platform eventually for pacing, and now it's Abbott's. Created MiniMed for Medtronic, Second Sight, Axonics actually, that was just purchased, and Neuromod. That came out of the Al Mann Foundation, or one of Al Mann's research groups. And Al passed away, I think, about 9 years ago. So a man who has passed away is still impacting this industry. So I get a call from Al at my home, and he goes, "Hey, I heard you're pretty good at what you do." I'm like, "Okay." We talked for about 10 minutes, and he goes, "All right, you're going to fly down here on Thursday of next week, and you're going to come to my house. We're going to have dinner. You're going to interview all day Friday and Saturday morning. Okay?" I said, "Yes, sir." And he hung up. And I was like, I don't know if that was a buddy of mine playing a joke on me, right? And so next thing you know, I get a phone call. It's his admin. I fly down, have dinner at his house on Mulholland Drive in California, and go through the interview process. And this is what, and I said, when, everybody wants me to go left, I'm going to go right. Jeff Greiner, who is the president of the company, at this interview, the second or third day doing all this, I told him exactly how I would approach this market and how I would go after Medtronic. And it really wasn't just about going after Medtronic. It goes back to how we would build greater value than Medtronic's been able to do with their conventional technology and really no improvements. And he leans back in his chair and he goes, I've interviewed so many people. And he goes, "You've told me exactly opposite of what they would do to build this market."
Mm.
And I said, "Well, conventional thinking leads to conventional results."
Yep.
And he's like, "You're hired," right? He's like, "We'll get an offer to you and, come on and let's make this thing happen." And so I was the first one in sales. And I brought in 4 regional managers, then 5. we went out and we hired 40 people, and we did it before we had FDA approval, but we knew we were going to get FDA approval because it was a 510K product. The platform was already being used in the cochlear implant, and we created an intense training process, a clinical training process, because the device was hard to operate from a programming standpoint. And so you needed to be really good at it. And we had a cadaver lab in which they had to perform the procedure. They had to instruct a surgeon doing the procedure. It was, an engineer, and the engineers were mucking up the system to cause errors to see if the reps could overcome it. And so we did all that. And then we did a sales training program that was a week long, and it was role plays and it wasn't just these ridiculous role plays. Charlie Johnson, who's no longer, working right now, he helped create these role plays. And Charlie Johnson, and that's the thing, going back to Medtronic, Sophomore Danek brought in a bunch of talent from US Surgical, in which their training programs were very intense, sales and clinical.
Mm-hmm.
I gravitated to that, brought that with Charlie over to Advanced Bionics, created these role plays, which it was a true role play in which you met with the office manager, you met with the nurses, you met with 3 or 4 doctors, you met with the hospital system to get it in. We went through this role play. And you were either moving on or not moving on to the next step based on how it went.
Right.
And training was harder than it was in the real world, intentionally so, because we were going up against the 800-pound gorilla.
Mm-hmm.
We got FDA clearance, we hit the market, and we killed it, right? And it grew. We went from 0 to over 200 million in 3 years, and Boston came in and paid approximately $3 billion for it. And we took a third of the market in 3 years. And everyone was saying to us, you're never going to be able to do this. You're never going to be able to do it. And I just sat there and laughed. And it's like, no, you guys keep going left. I'm going to go right, and got it done.
I think about that, and you had hired some spine folks. I think at that time you hired a very good FedEx salesman, I think, who I need to have on this podcast at some point. I believe he's out of Utah, and Travis McCoy.
Yep.
For those folks that, and it still exists today, where they just don't hire people that don't have medical already into neuromodulation a lot of times.
Yeah.
You were able to spot people that were just absolutely extraordinary. I can't think of the FedEx gentleman's name, but I know Travis. And those 2 guys were like 1 and 2 for a while.
Todd Bladel. It was Todd Bladel.
Okay.
Yep.
So how did you spot or isolate people that didn't have any medical or very, very little medical, and then know that they had the skill set to translate into maybe the pinnacle or peak of medical device sales with all the demands that being a neuromodulation rep in pain puts on somebody? How do you know that person's got what it takes? What do you see, or how do you?
Yeah, it's a great question, but I don't think Todd worked for FedEx. He actually worked for like Purolite, or a second or third tier company.
Mm-hmm.
And Ryan came out of the pharma industry, and Ryan is now this unbelievable entrepreneur. He's passed up so many people in his career, and still yet a humble and wonderful guy. But what we did is we didn't hire spine guys. I hired spine guys as my regional managers, and 2 guys out of pain. So one came from ANS, one came from Medtronic pain, and then 2 guys that came from spine that I knew over at Sophomore Danek.
Mm-hmm.
And then here was the issue. It was, I can't afford to pay a guarantee of $250,000 to a Medtronic rep. Okay. So we sat down and go, listen, let's hire these sales reps that are actually getting true sales training and who are not selling for the best company, but have to compete as a second or third tier company in that space. And then just get that track record and put them through an interview process where they have to prove how they overcame and were able to beat up the big competitor.
Right.
And that's what we did. And these guys still made a ton of money, but they earned it, right? They earned it. It wasn't just a guarantee. And once we started doing that, and then you're showing success, It's amazing how many people want to be a part of that team. And then it became easier to find those folks.
Yeah, nothing recruits like success, right?
Yep.
When you're sitting down interviewing somebody, I guess, my question would be is whether they have medical or not, you've hired, I don't know, hundreds, thousands of people.
Yeah.
What do you look for in the hiring process? Because that's a key part of this podcast is just, helping people really understand what's in the mind of the interviewer across the desk. And when you're looking to hire a rep at one of your startup companies that you're leading, what are you looking for?
Yeah, and it, for those that are trying to break into the field, we didn't attack it directly, but
Yeah.
the first thing is be the student of your game, and that's med tech. So even if you're not in med tech, be a student of the game of med tech so that you understand the industry,
Mm.
so that you come prepared saying, yeah, I might not know or have been selling in med tech, med devices, but I know this is happening, right?
Yeah.
I know this. So then it just gives you, an air of credibility. But there are a couple things that I look for still today. And it's almost impossible now, but I look for people who had to pay for their own college,
Mm.
right? Who maybe didn't go, to Northwestern in
Yeah.
Chicago, but actually went to Northern Illinois or Eastern Illinois, mainly because they didn't have the money to pay, right?
Yep.
Had jobs when they were 12, 13 years old, worked through college. I look for those characteristics. And like I said, it's harder today because you got to pay $250,000. It's hard to pay for your own college.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of kids with loans out there too,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yep.
Be proud of that, right? Be proud of the fact that you took a risk on yourself and that you have this debt and that you're going to work to pay off that debt and prove that you have a work ethic.
Mhm.
Did you even work in college? So I'm not interested in your ACT score. I'm not interested in what you got in your calculus class.
Right.
I'm interested in what you've done with your life, where you've come from, where you've overcome. And then for those guys, like I said, that you're out in sales and you're competing against the number one company and you're in the number two or number three company. Not that the number one, not that that's easy, but give me somebody who's a little bit more beat up and then show me the training process, sales training process that you came out of. That's where I'm going to give you an opportunity.
Mm. Yeah, it sounds like scrappiness.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, that's invaluable experience. I worked my way through college. I worked 40 hours a week and carried a full course load, right?
Yeah.
And lived with my parents in the basement of our house.
Yeah.
That's me.
Yeah.
That's a great delineator of kind of those things because you're looking for that grit,
Yeah.
I think is what it is. It's going to be cold some mornings. You're not going to feel like doing it. You get up and you got to go get after it anyway. One of the things that you've talked about is you don't think startups think early enough in terms of the validation and insight that the right sales leader can bring to early commercialization efforts. Can you speak to when you think the right time is for a startup to have a sales leader in place? And how early do they need to bring that person in to those conversations about commercialization?
Yeah. So if you take the advanced bionics perspective, I was hired a year before we were ready for commercial launch. And so I would say it's a year before, and it's even incredibly hard to get products in to the hospital, even to the ASCs. You're trying to get these products in. You don't even know what the VAT process is necessarily going to look like. You don't know who the main players are. The unfortunate situation is that these founders of these companies and these startups, they think because they're so in love with their product that everyone loves your product. And that's just not the case. They may love the product, but it's going to take a lot of effort to get it into the hospital. And then hey, it's better, cheaper, faster. Is like, I hear this all the time and I'm like, that has no meaning. It has no value. Let's talk about the clinical value for the patient, the doctor, the practice, the healthcare system, the economic financial value for the patient, the doc, the practice, the healthcare system, and a potential strategic value of attracting more patients, helping your current patients do better with a new technology. Where are those value statements within your messaging, within your sales training, all that stuff? It's not there. It's not there. And I understand that because they're so focused on the trials, the clinical trials, and getting that done. And then people think that sales is an afterthought.
Right.
And then how many companies go out and they go, well, we didn't know that the docs were going to think this about our product. And it's like, because you never asked them, right? You never went out and talked to doctors. Don't tell me the KOLs are, what you're relying upon the KOLs or your clinical sites. You're paying them, right? Not in a bad way. You're paying them because they're doing a clinical trial, right? And so they're giving you good feedback and stuff, but you need to go outside that group. You need to go where people don't know who you are and start having those conversations. And that's what we did at Advanced Bionics. We went out there, no product, we weren't FDA cleared, and started asking these questions. And that's where doctors are like, what in the world do you guys have? And then we came back. So we would create the messaging, because what you need is marketing, sales, R&D in a room, and having them tell you what the value of the product is. And I just spoke about this, put a little video out on LinkedIn about this, is where the engineer said and the marketing team said, no, Jim, you just tell them we have 4 current sources. They'll be excited. What the hell's a current source? You know?
Yeah.
And they're like, it's a battery. And I go, okay, so you have 4 batteries. So should I tell them we have 4 batteries? Yeah, say 4 batteries. What does that mean?
Right.
Right. And it was, I know you know what it means. I know in your heart, if you were selling it to an engineer, they would know what it means. How do I put that in a normal conversation type setting? And so 4 current sources means I can target 4 different areas of pain, or take all of those sources and focus on low back pain that nobody ever could do before.
Mm-hmm.
And I go, so that's the clinical value, right?
Right.
Addressing focal low back pain that nobody's ever been able to do before. It's not 4 batteries.
Yeah, that doesn't matter to them. They don't. This might be a novelty, but that's not really solving their problem. And you see that, and I know you see this more than I do, but I definitely see it as well, where you have exactly what you described, an engineer or a founder that's brilliant, and they have this novel idea and this concept, and they get some money and they go to academic institutions or thought leaders and KOLs, the elite of the elite of the elite of physicians, right?
Right.
And those people, they're researchers, but that's not the vast majority of all the potential customer base out there. And so taking it to the man in the street can be really difficult, if I hear what you're saying. Or that technology can be over engineered too.
That's right.
There's a lot in there that they're never going to use and they don't even care about.
Yeah, exactly. That's right. And you don't even have to, somebody's going to go, well, how do you do that? You go, well, we have 4 batteries to their 1.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Right.
Right. It's like, okay, I didn't have to say 4 current sources independently control. It was just, we have 4 batteries, they have 1. And it's a third of the size.
How early do you want to see yourself or other sales leaders involved in these things? At least a year before launch?
I think, it's a year before. It's a year before, because you have to almost undo some of the thinking.
Mm-hmm.
Not that it's bad or
Yep.
or under malice, or it's just not thought out to the end user, right?
No.
And how am I going to get it into this facility? There's a guy on LinkedIn, for your listeners that are interested. His name is Mark Copeland. I don't know if you've heard of him. So Mark, one, is just a great guy. He's funny. I told him, I said, if I sat next to you in college, I would have been thrown out. But he's the value analysis whisperer. He helped us at Raos, and I've been following on LinkedIn for about a year, and we met up, and just a great guy. But that's a resource that you want to bring in before you go commercial. You want to understand this value that you're going to bring with this product to the market, and have someone like him look at it and tell you how to position this, how you need to work with the business folks, how you have to work with the clinical folks to get this product in. Now, we didn't have that problem 20 years ago, but we have that problem today. And so you don't want to do that 6 months after a launch. You want to start that now and continue to refine it as you go have these conversations. So you bring someone like me in, you bring in 2 regional guys, that'll be your regional guys, and you go out to the market and you start having these conversations after you've done the work with the internal team, so that you get this feedback and go, listen, we thought this was going to work. It's not resonating, but this is resonating. So let's pivot, change, and enhance our messaging so that by the time the reps are hired and you're going through training, that they don't go, and they're going to get their teeth kicked in, but they're not going to get their whole body bloodied, right, by an MMA fighter doctor out there, right? So you're trying to reduce the risk of your sales force getting frustrated, upset, and demoralized because you didn't do this up front.
Have you ever had a moment or a situation in your career where you've been doing that work and you're like, oh, I know this is not going to work. The way they designed it, there's a design flaw, or there's just the market is not going to accept it, or the value isn't there, or anything like that? Has that happened?
Yeah.
Where you're like, I don't know how to deliver this news, but this is going to be bad.
Yeah. It's happened.
Tell us about that.
Well, it was just one of these things where you're listening, you're understanding the value, and then you're looking at the product and you're just going, this thing is not going to work. And it does to an extent, but it doesn't. And trying to fight to get something like this in is going to be painful, and it was.
Yeah.
And it didn't take off, and
Yeah. That happens.
It happens. And so it's like you said, I got 6 M&As under my belt, but I got 2 that were disaster. So,
Some of what you just spoke about bleeds into this next kind of question. Medical reps are more challenged today than they've ever been.
100%.
I mean, there are the skill set, especially at these really high end medical jobs, it's unreal to think that people can, sometimes I just sit back and I just think, I cannot believe that one person has all these skill sets, and yet they do. They exist on the face of the earth. There are people that can actually do this stuff. But the market is demanding from reps more than it ever has. And you've talked about that. They need to be clinically sound. They've got to have a great business mind. They've got to build rapport expertly. And one thing I wanted to touch on today, because all that makes sense, is you said they need to be a social media expert. What does that mean?
Yeah, so it's really interesting because I had this podcast, right? Kind of started off in 2018, and it was, quite frankly, I started it because I wanted my daughters to know who their dad was at work. That was it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there'd be this historical record for my kids to go, oh, that was my dad at work, because we don't see our parents at work
Mm-hmm.
and who they are. And then it morphed into something else, and then people start following you, and all that happens. And then so there's multiple reasons to do it. One reason is just to share your ideas, your thoughts, to help other people out, right? And you've mentioned a couple things that I've said on some of my posts, video posts, or written articles. I'm just doing it to share because I want people to get better. I don't need anything from it,
Mm-hmm.
And for somebody that's out there, a young rep, and 99% of them don't do it, they should share. Hey, I learned this today or this week or this year. These are some things that I was challenged with, and I overcame it. And I reached out to this person and that person to help me. And now I'm able to do X, Y, and Z. Right.
Yeah.
And then you get people to, as Matthew Ray Scott says, trust, like, and want to do business with you and respect you. Right. And if you don't know who Matthew Ray Scott is, as a sales rep, you go follow Matthew Ray Scott. You sign up for his Content Crib 3.0 that's coming up in February. And you go and be a student of his message and what he's doing on using video to help connect with doctors.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So he's using social media for the rep themselves to share their ideas. And then they're using video content to connect with individual doctors to be able to get their attention, then trying to stop by and have, Georgette, the office manager, turn you down, or Billy, the front desk guy, telling you to go home. There's other ways of doing it. So social media is two ways. Share your content, tell people what you're going through, and be meaningful about it, and have an intent behind it, but don't make it just because it's you and I want my name out there. Do it for a real reason. Because you'll see, like, I'll post for 3 weeks in a row and then I won't post. Right. Because it's like, I got nothing that I think is of value right now. Right. And so then use it to connect with docs, and then use it to teach your doctors how to use it to attract more patients. Right.
Yep.
So you've got to become, that's a student of a different type of game within what we're doing, but it's incredibly valuable. And like I said, the guy really to hone in on that would be Matthew Ray Scott, on how he's going after it and teaching that. On LinkedIn, you hit a bell on the profile of the person so that every time they put something out, you're reading it. He's the only guy I do that with.
Nice. And I love what you're talking about because, you've been in medical devices a long time. I've been in since 98. When I got in, it was very, very buttoned up. There were not a lot of windows into the industry. It was, a serious profession. There were always, wild cards and, people that joke around and have fun at meetings and stuff like that. But on the whole, I think in the totality of it, it's a serious thing, right? You've got patients, you've got doctors, someone's going to be on a table, they're going to get a medical procedure, et cetera, et cetera. But I really think that in the age of social media that we're all in and have been in for some time, it's really opening up pretty wide. What would you say to the rep that's really hesitant on this? Somebody that's in, like me, I'm 50, turned 50 a few weeks ago, who's kind of conditioned to not do this or be this person. What do you say to them if you could pull them aside?
Yeah. So think about it. Let me answer the question in a different way. I went to Matthew Ray Scott's Content Crib in Arkansas 2-3 weeks ago. I signed up because you need to constantly be curious. You need to constantly keep your skill level up, and you need to be a student of your game. And that's why you should do it. right? And if you're not curious and you're not a student of your game, the game will pass you up.
Good point.
And so this is not for just new reps. This is for everyone up and down the line. And it's for big med tech companies. They won't do any of this stuff and they won't let their reps do it because they're worried about legal this, legal that. Somebody was at the Content Crib and was let go because she posted some things that they didn't like.
Mm-hmm.
And there was nothing wrong with it. They were just like, well, you didn't have permission, and so we're done. And so you got to be careful with it.
Mm-hmm.
But reaching out to a doctor using, video, different engagement tools, that no one's going to look down upon that.
Yep.
And so while you're saying, well, my big strategic medical device company's not going to let me do it, nobody's going to stop you from sending a video to a doc to gain attention.
Right.
So you have to think about it in those terms, because if you're conventional, so is everyone else. That's why it's called conventional.
Mm-hmm.
Think differently, do things differently to get that attention.
Yeah, and LinkedIn is replete with pictures of reps and doctors together.
Yeah.
Hey, we just did our first case at, such and such institution and the outcome was great. People see that stuff.
Yeah, they do. Just be careful. If all you post is look at me and my doctor and my product, I will be the first one to unfollow, right?
Good.
Yeah.
I mean, there is a balance, right? But it's always interesting. And you can see people start to come out of their shell when you see some reps that you're like, I never thought I would see that. And I'm not judging because, it's a competitive world out there.
Yeah.
And I think that's great. I don't post every day because I, like you, if I post something, I really like it to be valuable for people.
Right.
My whole thing is with this podcast or other stuff is like, what is the value creation? What's the value add of someone listening to this? And I think that should be the kind of thought when people post, not just randomly throwing stuff up there.
100%.
MedTech space. You're an innovator. You're a thought leader. You're on the cutting edge. I'm getting asked all the time, what's new? What's hot? I know you are. Where's this industry going? What's going to happen now that we're post the election? What are you personally excited about and looking at in the MedTech space that's out there that you think is coming and is going to be the next big thing?
Yeah, a lot of stuff that's going on in neuro is exciting. And, where do you find this information? Be a student of your game. And if you're looking to break into med device, or if you're in there, and I know a lot of people that have a LinkedIn profile but are not on LinkedIn, they don't see it as a tool to educate yourself, but it is. But you have to do it right. And you want to hook up with guys like you, guys like me, guys like Mark Copeland, like Matthew Ray Scott, young entrepreneur CEOs like Jennifer Freed out of Chicago, Annalisa, that's our CEO at Raos. You want to hook up with these different CEOs at startups, not because you necessarily want to work at their company, but then if you follow their posts, they're talking about other companies.
Right.
And then you look at LSI, you look at MedTech Innovators, you look at the different innovation hubs around the United States, like at Northwestern, M Hub in Chicago, Mass Medic, Brian Johnson, who's the son of Charlie Johnson, who has it's a online news rag for med devices. It's those types of things that you want to do so that you get exposed to all these different companies, and then you go deep and start researching them. And you could go into one person and 3 hours later, you've uncovered so much stuff.
Yeah. And
once you start going down that road, you're going to just naturally be introduced to other things. But like I say, you have to do it a couple times a week. It's not like a 10-minute thing here and there. You have to dedicate the time to it.
Yeah.
And then you'll understand what's going on. Like digital health is an interesting space, but you've always got to be careful and cautious, because what is digital health? Digital health is telemedicine with a doc or a nurse, as well as, medical forms being read by AI in the cloud.
Yeah.
So be very discerning when you go down that road. But like I said, some of these people I mentioned, you follow them and then your network grows from there.
Right. Well, Jim, how can people find you, follow you, get in touch with you?
Yeah, just go to LinkedIn. I get DMs all the time. I'm willing to help.
Thank you for being on, Jim.
Yep.
We hit a lot of topics in a blitz. That's what I wanted to do. You've got a lot of expertise. We could have spent the whole show on any one of them, but thank you for being on. And would you come back?
Absolutely. I'd love to.
Thank you for joining us on the Chase MedSearch podcast. I hope that you gained some helpful insight from today's episode. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss future episodes, and give us a like on your favorite streaming platform. It really helps grow our audience. For more information on Chase MedSearch, visit our website at chasemedsearch.com. Thanks again for joining us. Until next time, I'm Jordan Chase, and this has been the Chase MedSearch Podcast.